Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Healthy Christian Podcast. My name is James, and I'm here with my friend Tim.
Hi guys, good to be with you.
And we are discussing the last sermon from our series, which happened yesterday. Tim
Hmm.
was speaking about physical health. How does the gospel
Yeah.
impact and affect our physical health? And just at the outset, I want to say how much I appreciated it. And Tim, I can't remember a time when we've had something as focused and concentrated, asking this question, looking at this kind of an area. And I
Yeah.
wonder if that's something about history and culture, the type of church we belong to,
Yeah.
evangelicals as Protestant faith. And so it was great to have this emphasis, and you covered a lot of ground, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation, not just because I'm going to ask the awkward questions, because there's so much to talk about again. And
Yes.
we've appreciated the feedback we've received from people. We've had
Very much.
questions of previous weeks. We don't have any specific questions this week, but please do keep sending those in
Yeah.
if you want us to cover different specific nuggets or questions or comments. But let me kick off by
Mm.
asking you. So, a couple of weeks ago, you spoke about emotional health,
Hmm.
and yesterday was physical health.
Yes.
Which one was harder to prepare for and preach?
Oh, great question. Yeah, thanks for what you just said, and it's making me think. Praise God for this series that is allowing us space
Mm,
to go there. You led into that. It was something that God spoke to you about on your sabbatical, and so I'm so thankful that God's been leading us to this. And isn't the Bible so practical and so
yeah.
down to earth and talking about these sorts of things? So yeah, it's really good. Uh, mm, I don't know. The emotional health one, I felt like I was mining from places I've been and journeyed really deeply myself for the last 3 or 4 years. Um, so in one sense, I felt like there was lots to kind of pull from in terms of training I've had, books I've read, and a personal journey I've been on. Physical health, I was really minded to not try and set myself up as an expert because I'm not, to not give much. I hope there wasn't loads and loads of, do this or do that, but consider this, think about that. And I felt
Yeah.
like it was a Holy Spirit thing, the ships idea, and to start with the principles first. I actually thought in my preparation of landing with the principles because I wanted those to be the things that stuck the most.
Mm,
But actually, in the end, it was like they needed foregrounding and then applying those principles to each of the three topics. So if you haven't heard it yet, we looked at food and drink, sleep, and exercise, but applying the principles of worship, stewardship, and discipleship.
mm,
Um, and so actually, I felt like I was asking myself and our church family kind of searching questions, challenging questions, hopefully good questions. And then, I mean, I must have said it 3 or 4 times, if not more. Yeah, there are 100+ ways of this being applied. How choices we make about food and drink, choices we make about exercise. Um, and so in that sense, it's easier because you're kind of trusting that God's leading people and you're hoping people just go away and think about it for themselves and then make their own decisions. I felt like with emotional health, perhaps there was a bit more of a kind of steer in some ways,
mm.
and maybe a bit more of a battle to fight in terms of like this is really, your feelings matter, what are the
Yes.
feelings behind the feelings, where are your feelings in the car, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I felt like I was almost like um yeah, contending with something, whereas I think yesterday felt a bit more like just bringing some questions, some practical questions into the light.
Yeah.
Rambling answer there.
No, that's great. It's a great kickoff. And I think for anybody who hasn't yet heard it, I'd really encourage you to listen to the recording because it is
Mm,
so rich and you covered so much ground. It was fantastic.
mm,
Thanks for what you just said there, and you emphasized this in the sermon as well. So let's just mention this a little bit more, which
mm.
is around acknowledging people's different circumstances and
Yeah,
challenges. And so what you weren't doing, which was great, was here's a template,
sure.
here's like a diet plan, an exercise plan, do this, and
Mm,
therefore you're reaching a standard and you're healthy. You were acknowledging that we're in very different places. And I wonder if you wanted to, and there's a theological aspect of that as well in terms of, so how can that be in this life? I wonder if you wanted to just restate that or re-emphasize it.
Yeah, there's no cookie cutter. Um, yeah, we're trying to I guess we're trying to see, well, what are the biblical principles, and then recognize there is potential for that to be applied in different ways. Yeah, you might need to ask me a kind of additional question on
Yeah,
that to tease something out, because I'm not
yeah,
much is coming to my mind in addition to what you've said. But
yeah,
I do agree with what you said, and I'm glad that that came across.
yeah. Good. Okay. Well, maybe something around then. So, we've got, if you think about the range of age and circumstance across the church family,
Mm,
from youngest to the oldest, and the opportunities to do some things but not others.
mm.
Um, is there what's the value in focusing on our physical health and deciding, okay, I want to try to improve in one area? Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing to do? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think so. I think so to an extent. Isn't it interesting that Paul says physical training is of some value?
Yes.
Now, we didn't spend time on what was meant there, and we can ask him ourselves one day. But for me, reading between the lines a bit and kind of extrapolating, he's like saying it's of some value, it's not of the highest value.
Yes.
So I'm a little loath to overstate it, but I do think the give careful thought to your ways kind of idea, that idea of stewardship, energy, health, almost like I do the bit I can do, and I trust God to do
Mm,
all that He does. And
yeah.
so within the choices I'm making about my sleep, actually, if I can kind of maximize
Mm,
for the glory of God, for His call on my life, and that could be to be a mum looking after a young child. It could be
mm,
someone working in a big company, actually bringing their best and bringing the kingdom of God into that place. Actually, yeah, how the choices I make, that kind of stewardship, discipleship, worship kind of principles, I think can be applied. So um,
yeah.
I still don't know if I'm answering your question very well, but I do think I do think that it has an impact. It has a knock-on effect. It counts. It's yeah, very interesting. This is your true and proper worship. Wasn't that an interesting
Mm,
verse?
mm,
Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to the Lord. This is your true and proper worship. It counts. I thought
yeah.
I was moved by that. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
I so that's Romans 12, isn't it? Romans 12, verse 1. As I give my body as part of worship, I should see that it counts. And that comes off the back of, I said this yesterday, it comes off the back of that hugely worshipful moment at the end of Romans 11.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, what do you think? I try and answer your own question, because I'd appreciate your thoughts on
I think where I was going with it was, why should we?
it. Mm,
So, if I think you counterpointed a little bit yesterday. So, there's eternity of new creation. Right now, there's this, like, eye blink of a moment. Our life is just a blink of an eye compared to eternity. So, why should we bother in focusing on our bodies? Because this time that we have is so fleeting compared to what's going to be in eternity. And you touched a bit on this yesterday, but how would you answer that?
yeah, because it's worship, because we're made in God's image. God gave us physical bodies. They
Mm,
have a part to play, because there's something of uh, that stewardship idea. Okay, it's not. He gave us our physical bodies, but they're not ours. They're His. He made
yeah.
them. He brought us back. He's in us.
Yes.
Uh, um, yeah. So like, I am not my own.
Yeah.
Incredible, kind of to apply
Absolutely.
that here. And yeah, it is mind bending to think. Okay, how does God, who is spirit,
Yeah.
then himself
Yeah.
come as a man, and having created us to be both spirit and body, how does that all interact? Don't fully know.
Mm,
It's definitely there though, isn't it? It's definitely
mm,
important. And is it the only thing that's important? No. our spiritual health. If someone was saying, should I choose, I can only do one, physical health, spiritual health, which would I choose? You wouldn't accept the premise of the question, but you'd probably choose spiritual, but
Mm.
you'd say, but they're linked.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no way they're not. We would all know how linked they are, and we see that in Jesus, and we see that in David. I kind of
Yeah.
tried to show them as examples. I'd love to think of other good examples from Scripture. Um, so yeah, I think that's the best I can do right now.
That's
Any other thoughts to throw in there for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great answer. So the thing that's so compelling to me, which wasn't when I was younger, was I'm not my own,
Yeah. Oh,
and that's a really countercultural message. And you delivered it really well, gently but firmly yesterday. If I think about the industries around wellness, they're focused on you. You're worth it. You're this, you're that. Actually, I don't. My body doesn't belong to me. I've been bought at a price, at a significant price. Jesus laid down his life to buy me, and
yes,
therefore, stewardship, looking after something that doesn't belong to me, is really
yes,
important.
yes.
As a motivator, that is not something that I was really alive to when I was younger. I think as well, as I've got older, life stages have meant something to me. So,
Yeah, good.
getting married, and thinking about, okay, how can I look after myself for Karen, and making sure that I'm around. Then, of course, having children, that kind of, even you don't, I double down. Many people do even more than, okay, so I want to be physically active
Mm.
with my children and for my children and into older age. So what can I do about that? And that's really motivating. That's probably what's been more, uh, being honest, motivating to me. But
Mm.
having the growing sense as well of, okay, I'm bought with a price. I'm not my own. In terms of the research for the series, and we've talked about stuff and read stuff, I happened upon the practice of Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards is an incredible American preacher, um,
Mm.
and theologian, and philosopher. Actually, I think what he's written and spoken has impacted law and culture and philosophy across the Western world, not just America. And it happened across his practice, which was to monitor how he felt after eating different foods.
Oh wow.
So I can't
Oh,
remember what era
interesting.
Jonathan Edwards is, like 1600, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, wow, okay, yes, ahead of the game. And he would notice that there would be a sluggishness after certain foods. He would fast at extended periods of time as well. So he had that practice.
Mm.
Um, and so it seems like his motivation was, okay, God has given me my life. He's called me. How can I steward that calling and live up to that mission and purpose? And I thought it was amazing. And this is a long answer, but one more thing I'll say as well, listening to someone recently, which helps me a lot actually. If I'm in a moment of pressure and challenge and stress, I could go one way or the other. I could basically eat whatever I wanted, as comfort, or be really disciplined. No, I need to look after myself because I need to be well and alert and have energy through
Mm.
this thing. But then in fallow periods, when there's not a stressor and there's not a challenge, it could be easy for me to kind of lose self-discipline. But listening to someone talking about how it's kind of the opposite, those are the moments where you can invest in your energy and your health so that you're ready for the next thing that's coming along. And there's going to be a next thing.
Yeah,
There's going
yeah,
to be
yeah,
a crisis. There's going to be a challenge. And that helps me as well in terms of the why I do
yeah.
something. So I'm not only in the moment when I can feel the challenge, but it's
Mm.
okay. I need to be ready for what that next thing is. And so there's an idea there about margin as well. I think,
Yes.
margin in terms of time commitment, sleep,
Mm.
food, exercise, having enough space in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really useful. Yeah, thank you. I was thinking as well as you're speaking about how that going back to that question of like spiritual health, physical health, this idea that we will have physical bodies as well
Yeah.
in heaven. And I don't fully know what that was going to be like. I don't think scripture gives us much clarity. But we see the resurrected Christ
Yes.
with a physical body eating,
Yeah.
yeah, different. There's some mystery there and some difference, but he's able to engage physically, and so
Yeah.
that's something to think about as well. So it's not like our physical bodies. There'll be change, transformation, difference. Are they're new bodies? I don't know, but it's worth remembering that element too.
If I was going to be cheeky, I'd ask you the question, but I'm not going to. Is there going to be exercise in the new heaven and the new earth? I have no idea,
We don't
so
know.
I won't ask
We
that.
don't know.
So you packed so much in, which is brilliant because, and I do think this will be a sermon we can refer to in the future when we want to think about different things and refer people to.
Mm.
But you couldn't get everything in. So
Mhm.
yeah, what didn't make the cut? What would you have emphasized more? And I've got one particular thing I think I can think of.
Yeah, a few things. Um, Sexual health
Oh yeah.
within physical health. Um, and just actually kind of just an understanding it's a way of applying those different principles. Um, and Fasting. I'd like to have talked more about fasting. I felt like I did a very kind of quick reference to kind of I think most of us are kind of more accustomed to feasting than fasting, but we
Some
see
of
in
us are
David.
glad. Some of us are glad that fasting didn't really make the cut.
um, I wanted to talk a little bit more, if I'd have had time, around both the kind of coming together of miracles and medication
Hmm.
linked to our physical health. If I'd have kind of critiqued my own message, I'd have said that there wasn't enough there about the
Hmm.
miraculous intervention and power of God
Yeah.
working into our physical bodies. And if
Yeah.
you're going to give a really biblical overview of physical health, there has to be a reference and a recognition of how much it's the Holy Spirit's power. You know, most, if you're to look at kind of the references to kind of physical health in the Gospels, most of it's linked to healing and how Jesus is interested in that and it's relevant. And so
Yeah.
um, that felt like just something that I trust we'd talk about at other times, and I want us to talk about at other times. But that kind of hit the cutting floor and was brought out beautifully in the service for Evelyn and her contribution just before the preach. And isn't
Yeah.
God good in that?
Great. Yeah.
Um, and holding that alongside medication. So maybe just to say very
Yeah.
briefly,
Yeah.
this idea that God heals us through the miraculous and through medication. And
Mm.
I'm using medication in the broadest sense of the word there to probably just recognize kind of intervention from health professionals, possibly even include ideas like supplements alongside that as well. I don't really want to talk about that anymore, taking vitamins, taking other kind of supplements. I was thinking about how physiotherapists have helped me
Mm.
heal, thinking about dentistry, occupational health, psychiatry, doctors and nurses, surgeons. God is so good and works through medicine and works through the miraculous. And we, as Jesus followers, can thank him for both, can ask him to work through both, can pray and expect God to be working in both, whilst also trusting him and his timing. And sometimes we're not healed and better yet. And we live in that sort of that tension and that agony at times too.
Great. I just Googled it as you were talking because there can be maybe not consciously, but this divide in terms of, okay, God heals. We
Mm-hmm.
pray for healing, we believe for healing, and then when that doesn't work, then we turn to the NHS or whatever. And there can be that kind of false dichotomy. And I just was Googling because, of course, the idea of a hospital, the origin of a hospital, comes from Christianity.
Yeah.
So it's fourth century, I think.
Is it right?
So Christians back then didn't have this idea that, okay, we do stuff over here, it's in our control, but then when we really need something that we can't do, we ask God for it. You used the word holistic yesterday a number of
Yes.
times. I think that's a good example.
Yes. The Apostle Paul saying to Timothy, "Take a little wine for your
Yeah,
stomach.
yeah,
Bring me a cloak."
yeah.
He doesn't see it as either or; it's both together.
Mm,
Which I think is very moving. I read this story. Can I share this? Just partly,
yeah.
mostly for entertainment, but I read this story of this lady who is, I think she's 87. Let me just find it because I made a note for it for this podcast, and I would have. So there's an 87-year-old Londoner. He's called the oldest biohacker in the business. She takes 70 supplements a day, washes her
Wow.
hair with sheep shampoo,
Wow.
sleeps on a silver threaded bed
Sheep
sheet.
shampoo. What even
Sheep
is that?
shampoo, mate. Are you not using it? I
Go
don't know.
on.
I'm just reading the article I read. Regularly has her blood infused with ozone, injects herself with exomes.
Not recommending these things, by the way.
No, we're not recommending ourselves. Derived from stem cells taken from pregnant women.
Oh my gosh.
And she's flying to Panama to have a £300,000 rejuvenation cocktail that is illegal in the UK. And you might like the idea of dying and go to heaven, says this grandmother of three, but I have no interest. I
Uh,
just thought it's a kind of hilarious and kind of tragic example of that kind of
yeah.
desperation to stay alive, and like maybe a very extreme example of that overuse of supplements and treatments and those sorts of things.
It's a great anecdote, and I wonder if it speaks to the previous question a little bit as well, in
It
terms
does.
of, you become a Christian. It's not just, okay, I now believe in something or someone. We're transformed. Our view of ourselves, our view of the future, and one of the key differences is the fear of death being removed.
Yeah.
Now, I think, as we're honest, we'll all be nervous and have fears and things. It's not like Christians are immune to these things, but
Mm,
the curse has been removed and the fear of death.
yeah.
And so I wonder if the tension there is, well, I don't need to look after my body anymore because I'm going to a better future. But Paul and others are not. They don't draw that false dichotomy. It's like, okay, steward who you are and what you have in order to serve God and glorify God, but as well, remember your life has a trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. It has a trajectory. We're not ultimately living for this life,
Yeah,
but for the next.
yeah,
And then also a patient waiting. I've
yeah.
had the privilege of being with a number of people as they're approaching death or getting their heads around death, or even just into old age. And there
Mm,
can be a sense of like, I'm ready to go. And there
mm,
can be there's a part of the journey of just I'm waiting, God, for
mm.
you to take me. This idea of the number of days are written in his book. It's
Yes,
amazing truth. It's not just an idea, it's a truth.
yeah,
The number of our days is written in his book before one of them came to be, Psalm 139. Okay, I'm trusting you, God, that actually my number of days is in your hands. And that
yeah.
includes waiting for glory, even in those last years. And that's a that's a that's a time of life that's can be really hard. We don't talk about it much. And we recognize that actually God's there and able to help us even in that moment and those moments. And actually, medical advances do sometimes prolong people's lives. And I'm not wanting to kind of overreach here in what I'm saying. We do recognize sometimes that people are alive longer than perhaps
Mm,
they might naturally kind of be best to be. And so,
yeah.
yeah, I guess it's just patience, trusting God, He's in charge, and asking for His grace in those days, weeks, months, years for
Yes.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really helpful. A bit of a gear change.
Hmm.
One of the things you said yesterday, bearing in mind that you're not saying you're an expert, just you've been talking about your experience, where you're on the journey, and it really felt like that, by the way. We're all kind of on this journey in different ways, in different places. So sharing ideas and information is
Definitely.
really helpful.
Yes.
Um, I had come across, two images of brain scans
Yeah.
uh, before someone had taken a walk and 20 minutes afterwards, just a
Mm.
walk, nothing strenuous. And if you could picture it, the kind of the brain active just lighting up on the person who's just taken a 20-minute walk,
Wow.
the difference of that.
Wow.
So I wonder, you'd said something along the lines of, I can't find it in my notes, you do something, but you make sure you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why did that occur to you? Why do you think that's important?
Um, a number of reasons. I've heard it said, and so it landed with me as great advice I've heard other people say. And again, in line with the idea there's no cookie cutter. It's not
Yes.
like you
Yeah.
must do press ups
Yeah. Yeah.
and run 10 miles.
No.
Actually, so it's not so much the exact type of exercise, it's the fact that actually many different types of exercise have the similar benefits. I think it's about sustainability. If you're doing, if I had to get up and swim in a cold pool every morning, I think I would struggle. So
One of
as
my
an
sons
example,
would be up for that.
yeah, I'm sure. And actually, I'd probably get into it, to be honest. But actually to find something that is enjoyable will
Yeah.
enable it to be sustainable, and because it's not about doing it for the next 2 weeks. It's not about a kind of fad where, for this tiny little season. It's about the decades, isn't it?
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
spoke about my dad yesterday, and
Yes.
he's a great example
Yeah.
to me on loads of levels, but he's a great example in this. And he's
Mm.
found something. So he's a runner. He's 78, I think,
Mm.
maybe even 79 this year. He still runs three times, 4 times a week.
Amazing.
And I'm like, so for me, I think I'm interested in doing something that's going to last for decades
Yeah.
and is sustainable in that way too. So if you can find something that's enjoyable, that surely helps.
I heard Nicky Gumbel talk about his practice, and
Mm,
so he has left HTB now, hasn't he? He's focusing on a global alpha thing
mm,
initiatives, I think. And he talks about gets up at early enough to what does he do? I think he cycles to the Serpentine, Hyde
okay.
Park. I think that's Hyde Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Hyde Park. Anyway, somewhere in London.
Sounds
Swims
right.
in the Serpentine,
Yeah.
cold water swimming,
Yeah.
and then walks around, whether it's Hyde Park or one of the parks, while he prayer walks. And that's his
Fantastic.
daily
What a
practice.
start.
So
Let's do
sustainable,
that.
enjoying it is really important because then you'll
Yeah.
keep doing it, won't you? If you don't enjoy it, it's just really, really hard work.
Yeah.
And I wondered there as well, there's the benefit of doing so in terms of other aspects. One of the stats that I found was people who laugh regularly heal faster.
Isn't that amazing?
So it's like it just bears out what you were saying earlier about how connected we are. Spiritual health influences physical health and vice versa, and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And how amazing our bodies are. You mentioned a couple of stats yesterday. You didn't go weren't over heavy with them, but they were pretty incredible in terms of the number of breaths, every day, or the neural
20,000 breaths a
connections and
day.
things that are happening.
Yeah.
One stat I heard was, which I thought was really cool. Um, I'll probably get the numbers wrong, but it's the principle of it. So we're seeing more and more Gen AI tools being used in our lives, and one of the questions around the use of those tools is, okay, so what about the energy usage and what
Mm,
that's doing in terms of emissions and just using energy so others can't use it. And
mhm.
one kind of query you send to ChatGPT or whatever uses quite a lot of energy, and because it's doing all the thinking and behind the large language model and all that kind of stuff. But the stat was, our brain runs on less power/energy than like a low LED bulb.
Yeah.
It's like under 20 watts, I think.
Yeah.
And
I
you
think I
think
found
about
18 watts or something. Yeah.
yeah, and so how well designed our brains are. God has
That's
made
so
us.
cool.
Yeah,
That's so cool. And doing all those millions of connections and things.
yeah.
Yeah, isn't God amazing, hey?
Yeah.
In how he
So
made us.
I'd really love to pull this one out as well.
Yeah.
So you said very, very helpfully yesterday, a number of times, this isn't about imposing, this is how you do it, how you should do it.
Hmm.
Here's the things to consider. But one of the principles you emphasized was freedom.
Mm.
And you included a really great quote from one of the Gospels where the Pharisees and Jesus' opponents accused him of being a glutton and a drunkard, which I would just love to think about for a moment because that's incredible. And yet he's, fasting at various points as well. But the glutton and drunkard thing really jumped out at me. There's freedom there as Christians and as followers of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's not a verse I've mentioned often in a preach on a Sunday, and it slightly shocked me just to say it out loud. But I think, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But it doesn't mean he was a glutton or a drunkard. This is
No.
his kind of enemies and critics kind of speaking, but they've picked up something of his freedom
Yes.
and perhaps something of the behavior of those around him that he's not necessarily, he's
Yes.
perhaps speaking into other things as higher
Yeah.
priorities in their life, or the people that just are happy to be around Jesus and feel welcomed by him. but water into wine.
Yeah.
The kind of the bread that was left over after the feeding of the 5,000. So Jesus is not into half measures, is he?
No,
Um,
no.
and kind of being miserly in those sorts of ways. So it is worth taking note of that there was a freedom and David is a feast. It's a feast as the Ark of the Covenant comes in. It's not
Yeah.
like
Yes.
have a small token gesture. It's not like those sample guys that never give you enough. You want to have a bite of the whole thing, and they give you a tiny little bit. Yeah. What do you do with Jesus being accused to being a glutton and a drunkard?
I love it because Jesus offends the religious.
Yeah.
Jesus offends the people who are imposing their rules and frameworks to appear to be better than others,
Hmm.
and he just surpasses that. And so, to me, feasting doesn't mean in excess all the time. I
No.
don't think so. The thing that I heard a while ago was a particular culture and quite high levels of obesity.
Hmm.
And for all kinds of reasons, that might be socioeconomic, food availability. Cheapest food is terribly calorie rich and processed.
Yeah.
People don't have access to other types of foods. There's not a judgment or a blame thing there. It's just reality.
Yeah.
But what was noted was people seem to have lost their ability to differentiate between when they were thirsty and when they were hungry.
Hmm.
So they were thirsty, but they were confused, so they would eat more.
Yeah.
So there's something about not only self control, but self awareness and self knowledge. And again, I think there's freedom there. What's okay for one person might be quite different for another. So we're not imposing our own personal views necessarily about things. That doesn't mean we can't say, we won't say anything. There'll be some things that, if you see people over consuming a load of, sports drinks all through the day and from like 6 a.m. in the morning, for example, I think it probably is right to say, do you know what? Check your calorie count and what that's doing to you, because it's not going to be good long term. But that freedom idea is really, really important, because otherwise I think we could all turn into mini Pharisees in terms of, well, look what I'm doing and you're not doing that. And what's the purpose there? The purpose is always to self justify. We want to make ourselves higher and bigger than others. We're
Yeah.
doing better than others, which is a terrible motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think to the idea of, because and it's a phrase, it's a you phrase, as far as I'm aware, you probably got it from somewhere else, freedom within a framework,
Mm.
and that encouragement to not do my plan or their plan or his plan, but find a plan, find a framework. And that could look like quite detailed, or it could look like almost no
Yeah.
framework at all, but at least there's been careful thought given to it. What
I
did you
think, yeah, I think it's a New Testament way of thinking. I think that when Gentile Christians, I'm misusing this example, so I'm pulling out a principle. So I hope people
Mm.
understand that. I'm not trying to say this applies, but I think it's a principle I find useful. When in Acts, when Gentiles started, so Gentiles were non-Jews,
Mhm.
started to be saved, and primarily through Paul's ministry. But I think maybe was it Phillips? I can't remember as well. Before Paul, um, the Jewish Christians were like, well, hang on a minute. God's revealed His word to us, which we call the Old Testament. They wouldn't call it that; they just call it Torah. And there are things here which are transcend culture, that are principles. So, what do we need? What framework do we need to give to the Gentile Christians
Mm.
so that they are living in line with God's word and in fellowship with their Jewish brothers and sisters, Jewish Christian brothers and sisters?
Mm.
And I can't quite remember the details, but it was along the lines of, don't eat meat that's been offered to idols or with blood in it.
Right.
Um, and remember the poor. And that was it. That's the framework. There's a lot of freedom in that framework.
Mm.
And I think that's a New Testament grace-based way of applying do's and don'ts. I
Great.
think there should be very few specific do's and don'ts. There are going to be some times, because of culture, because of conscience, we touched on this in previous conversation, where
Yes.
actually it's loving and there's wisdom in choosing not to exercise our freedom.
Yeah.
But I think that that kind of freedom within a framework breeds maturity. And my own life, my own life when I was a student, God told me to stop drinking alcohol.
Wow. Okay.
And that was because of, I think, partly because of excess.
Mm,
And so for, I can't remember, but at least 2 years, I think it was.
okay. Wow.
And it was difficult, going out with student friends who,
Mm,
like back then, like the only person in the room seemed to be not drinking was really
yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
And then over time, I just felt in myself permission from God to reintroduce it.
Mm,
Now that was something God was speaking to me about. That it's not something that is imposed on everybody.
yeah.
And I
And
know for
for a
some
time and
Christians,
for a purpose.
yeah, yeah, I know for some Christians they would have strong conscience reactions towards alcohol, and I
Yes.
would respect that. But
Yeah.
there are conscience issues as opposed to no. These are um, provisions. These are commands that need to all be followed. I think there's wisdom in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I remember, I hope I'm not getting this wrong. If I am, forgive me. But I remember hearing about C.S. Lewis smoking. And you're like,
Yeah,
what is like one of
yeah,
the
yeah.
kind of great Christian minds of kind of, recent decades. And yet he
Spurgeon,
smoked.
Spurgeon would smoke his cigar to the glory of God.
Yeah. Yeah. And size and shape would, what looks like and appears
Yeah,
to be kind of
yeah,
healthy size and shape, very different today. And we do benefit from
yeah,
scientific research and growth. Is not like, we should go back kind of 200 years and just do what they did. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? What the different battles we're facing and fighting, and what helps others. That free don't yes, there's freedom, but don't I think there's a New Testament quote that says, "To the pure, all things are pure." Um,
yes,
but actually, there's wisdom applied to that, and there's a recognition we live in community and what helps others. You might be free to vape in terms of, there's no biblical kind of instruction against it necessarily, apart from how do you apply worship, stewardship, and discipleship to the
yes,
kind of choice around that, and how
yes,
might it help others who are watching
yes,
and kind of following your example.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, yeah. Great point. Thanks for touching on body. So you
mm,
mentioned it briefly yesterday, body image, and I wondered
yeah.
whether that's something just to mention now. So
Yes.
for many people, because of, I don't know, pictures we've seen, messages we've heard since we were young that are now accelerated and magnified even more in terms of social media and what we see in other types of media. We could either become very proud in terms of
Hmm.
how we look because of
Hmm.
what we've done, how we looked after, or probably for the most part, most people will feel like, oh, actually, I'm not very good because of body shape, body image, that kind of stuff. What would you say to that from a gospel and Christian perspective?
Yeah, I really feel the emotion linked to that.
Yeah,
Actually, I think it's deeper than I'm not, or behind that I'm not very good could be a real sadness, real disgust. Like, can you take your top off and look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm okay with me?
yeah,
I think we've got to get on that journey towards that. And that should be what we're aiming for, because we recognize God made me. And I felt like it came out stronger than I'd prepared for it to come out. Like, God did a good job, when I preached it. There's something of the spirit in it. God did a good job when he made you. He
yeah,
wasn't having an off day. He
yeah,
didn't just kind of stick some bits together from some leftover parts, and that includes skin tone, includes hair color, includes height, includes shape and size.
yes,
We're not to all try and conform to whatever social media is telling us is kind of right or best.
yeah,
And this is for men as well as women.
yeah,
I think actually body image, body shaming, that kind of disgust stuff is just as pertinent for both genders.
mm,
I think it's often a bit more hidden than blatant, so it can kind of lurk underneath rather than be right kind of front and center when we're thinking about who we are. Um, that shame, so powerful. But that kind of, what does the gospel say? Where it says, God made me, he loves me, did a good job, he's proud of me, he thinks well of me, and my physicality is included in that. And I want to get to a place where I agree with him rather
Yeah,
than I'm agreeing with what the world says.
yeah,
I remember someone said to me when I was 18, I was on a Christian camp and I had my
mm,
shirt off,
mm,
bunch of lads. And a
mm,
girl said to me, "Ugh, you're emaciated. Ugh, you're
mm,
emaciated." And it was like she didn't mean to hurt me or harm me. It was just kind of bantery,
mm.
just I don't know. But it really, really wounded me to
Yeah,
the idea I thought I need to work hard to not be
yeah,
skinny.
yeah.
Now I have the opposite problem. But at the time, and I'll maybe speak to that in a moment as well. At the time, I thought, yeah, that affects kind of my view of me, and that
Yes,
isn't a view that Jesus agrees with. That I'm in any
yeah,
way ill.
yeah,
So that definitely wounded me, and thinking about what girls think as a boy, and thinking about what other blokes think, and do I match up? Do I measure up? Am I buff enough or
yeah.
tall enough? Or whatever. Um, yeah, there's something important there.
So and thank you for saying that. The uniquely Christian perspective for me, because I don't really understand what the basis is, what the foundation is for valuing your body from a different worldview. Because what is it that makes one person valuable and yet another person who's completely different? The uniquely Christian thing is we're all made in God's image.
Yeah,
So the person who is a super athlete, as well as someone who is Down syndrome or
yeah,
has another aspect or just looks different, is less, it's not as strong or not as, attractive from an Instagram perspective. Well,
yeah,
no, that's not the basis in which we value and we recognize or ascribe value. We're all made in God's image. And who is anyone to say that someone is not valuable if they're made in God's image? None of us can say that, which is incredibly powerful.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I, I would love there to be some conversations kind of coming out of this that are beyond what I feel able to really speak into
Mm.
around things like makeup
Yeah,
and cosmetics. Sam and I talk about this quite regularly. She
mm.
would sort of helpfully point out the gender difference between what's acceptable and normal. She's like,
Yeah,
it's normal for everyone to wash, it's normal for everyone to cut their hair, it's normal for everyone, for male and females to shave. Why is there this need for to
yes,
be kind of acceptable, to look quote unquote normal for
yeah,
women to have to wear makeup but men not to? And she would
yes,
talk about like ancient Egyptian culture where men wore makeup as well.
yeah,
So she's pointing out and wrestling with and kind of quite rightly a bit cross with that kind of disparity and difference that
yes,
is normal within our society for women to, if you're going to leave the house and be in public, you need to have a bit of lip gloss on, or you need to have your
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And I think there's freedom to, it's
yeah,
not that makeup's bad. I think there's kind of freedom to express
yeah.
yourself in how you look and how you do your hair, how you do your makeup, but as long as there's freedom not to.
And
And
neither
you
person should be judged for their choices.
exactly. And so we need if you're female listening to this, like talk in life groups, talk with your friends about this,
Yeah.
and you'll have more wisdom and answers than I can bring. Yeah,
Mm.
can I say one more thing
Yeah, I
just
was going
about
to say last words
presumption?
for the
Sorry.
time. Yeah, I was going to say last words, last thoughts, because I'm conscious of time.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I want to use this for last words then.
Well, take
Well,
that and then do last words.
um, I was gonna ask a question about fasting, how to
Mm.
start. Like
Mm.
if I was thinking about, okay, I want
Yeah.
to actually grow in
Yeah.
in
Okay.
in in this, like how would I start?
Yeah. All right. So again, offered lightly to consider rather than this is the way. And I appreciate people do things like fasting from media and phones and stuff, which I think is
Mm,
really, really good. But I don't think it's the same. I think it's a slightly different thing.
yeah.
So what I would say is skip a meal. Start with a
Start by
meal.
skipping a
Start with
meal. Yeah.
one meal, and use that time that you are either going to prepare the food and or eat the food to pray. And praying might be you go for a walk, you talk to God. It might be sit down with your Bible. It might be sit in silence. It might be you worship, and turn your feelings of hunger into prayer. So that's
Mm,
what I do, because I'm the
really
world's worst
helpful.
pastor. I just think about food the whole time. So I talk to God about, for example, Lord, I want you as much as I feel like I want a burger right now, or whatever it might well be.
Yeah,
And I want to long for you. And then
great.
some of the Psalms and other passages kind of lead into that idea about a longing for God, thirsting for Him as well. And I think there's a congruence when we're actually experiencing hunger and thirst
Mm,
in that way. And I just wouldn't do too much too soon.
good.
For some of us, maybe you want to like, okay, I'm going to fast for a week. I'm like, well, maybe you can, but I certainly couldn't from zero. I need to build up and gradually. So, one meal a week is that build up until you could do half a day, until you could do a day, until you could do an overnight. Just
Very
progress
wise.
and use
Helpful.
wisdom and let God encourage you. God might give you faith. Actually, I want to push through something, and
Mm,
that might be a big step, or it might be, so again, no, I'm sure there are more practical suggestions than that, but that's what I would be thinking about.
that's super helpful. I think that's brilliant. Not much to add to that at all. So thank you. Can I
Yeah.
ask another question?
Yeah.
Short one. Metrics. How do you
Mm.
know if you're physically healthy? What
Oh,
are the
great.
metrics to pay attention to? And I'm not
Yeah.
asking you as an expert either, but is
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
any thoughts you got on that?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, where I'm at right now is I'm a middle-aged man, and so early in my 40s, I went to get a what was called then I think a well man check. So you go to the
Yeah,
GP,
yeah.
they take your vitals, and they've got a baseline to check against, because I felt
Mm,
like I was healthy, but I didn't know if I was healthy. I mean, how
mm,
do you know if you're unhealthy if you've never
mm.
been? So yeah, so I do that. I've had a message through from the GP saying, "Do you want to come for another one, Reese?" That's good. They're prompting me. So again, I've
Great.
got a baseline. I can check in with that,
Okay.
and I think that's good stewardship.
Yeah, yeah.
Metrics depends what kind of exercise you're into, but you and I talk about this a little bit. There's some fitness metrics that are very easy to measure. If you've got like a certain watch and things, you can keep an eye on that. For example, it might tell you the heart rate is really up, one day or one week, and that can be a sign that actually,
Mm,
there's an underlying infection or a longer term health thing. Um, I think it's I think it's helpful to think about portion sizes. I think it's helpful to think about meals between meals. So that's the metric that you're counting. I think it's helpful to have an understanding of calories,
mm,
because we can be really fooled by the way some food is offered to us, that it's not high calorie and really it
mm.
is. And you really challenged me about sleep yesterday. I don't do very much about this. I could wear my watch to track my sleep, and I've never really had much desire for that, because I feel like I turned to a
Oh, you
bit of a
take
lab
yours
rat.
off, do you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it felt like I'd be a bit of a lab rat. I know other people do, and it's helpful. But you talked about consistency of sleep. So, kind of getting up and going to bed within
Yeah,
30.
just something I'd read that piqued my interest on it rather than anything I
Yeah,
can really comment
yeah,
on with any
yeah.
authority.
Yeah, so I'll be thinking about that as well, because that could be something that I can improve. And I think one of the encouragements from yesterday was you don't have to try and be like someone else, but maybe, you were saying what one thing, no matter where you are in life, your level of activity, physical ability, no matter what it is, what could one thing be you could improve in your life
Mm,
for good stewardship? But
yeah.
what do you think around metrics?
Yeah, I thought about steps. I
Yeah,
really think it's lovely, tangible, easy to monitor way that helps one think about whether I've been active. I know I've had days where I've been shocked the number of how few a number of steps I've done.
yes,
And so that's a nice one. I like for me, my personality type, this is about self-awareness. Gamifying something does help
yeah,
me,
yeah,
or just that little kind of gives me that little nudge.
yeah,
I think hours in terms of sleep's worth having, you know, an awareness of. And I do know that different people need different number of hours
yeah,
sleep. But I thought the consistency thing was a good challenge, as well as um, sufficient number for what you need and what is healthy for you and what you know is good for you. I'd have
Mm.
loved to have talked more about um, what people do when they're struggling to sleep, because I
Yeah.
generally, by God's grace, I sleep fairly well. When I'm stressed or have difficult things going on, I don't struggle so much to get sleep, but I do wake up and stay awake for a couple of
Mm.
hours. So, but that's less
Mm.
often than my norm, which is to sleep fairly well. I do
Yeah.
think it's hard for people who are struggling to sleep, and that kind of idea of sleep being a gift. You're like, okay, God, I want that gift, and I don't feel like I'm being given it. And that's a really tough one for people. And
Yeah. Well,
um,
maybe we could touch on that another time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Any last words from you then, James?
I don't think so from me. Is it anything else that you just want to emphasize, or anything we didn't cover?
I think if I was going to sum the whole thing up in a sentence, it's that give careful thought to your ways. You
Yeah.
know, with whilst recognizing all the other things in the mix too, like particularly worship. Um, yeah, and I hope this has helped people find their answers and have space and time to be challenged and encouraged. I hope I was praying yesterday it would land warmly
Yes.
and gently and in an encouraging heart. And I hope this,
Yeah.
and I trust this conversation has had that emphasis as well. This isn't a kind of, oh, yeah, another thing I must do, but actually,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
what a privilege that I can
Yes.
channel all of this, the
Yeah.
steps, the hours, the calories, the hair, the makeup, the whatever. I can channel it as worship. I can see it as stewardship, and I can grow in my discipleship, my following of Jesus through it. That's the heart. That's the
Yeah.
gospel of grace, new identity that we get to now live in
Mm.
this area of health, for
Yeah.
Jesus in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Let's close there. Thank you so much for all the work you put into the preparation and the preaching, but the heart behind it as well. Really encouraging, and something that we just haven't focused much at all on. I think in our church life in the past, so the
yeah.
preaching and teaching. So very helpful
Thanks, James.
balance that you brought.
Thank you, James, and thank you because our friendship and relationship has had a huge effect in these areas for me. And
Mm.
that's worth saying as well. It's in the community of the church, in our friendship and connection that we I trust sharpen one another in this way.
Yeah.
We encourage one another in kind of
Yeah.
healthy choices,
Yeah.
and it definitely has made a difference in this for me. So thank you for
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
Bless you,
Likewise.
bless you guys. Thanks for listening.